Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Mohan Ananda, Bob Burg, and Dawn Bell. And I would like to ask the question, how do you tell the difference between productive conflict and useless conflict on a team? Dawn, can you kick us off, please?
Sure. So I think first of all, it's important not to avoid conflict in teams, but the conflict needs to be constructive for sure. And I think how you can tell the difference is if the conflict seems to be very personally motivated or personally directed, it's probably not going to be productive conflict. And if the conflict is not rooted in solution seeking, but is maybe more rooted in venting or complaining or something of that nature, or something that may be out of scope for the team to manage, then it's probably not productive conflict.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think Dawn really hit it on the head. I think when it's gossipy, when it's something that really has nothing to do with bringing value to the team, it is probably not constructive. When it's something that is going to help the team, it's going to bring value to all concerned. It's going to help somebody see something that maybe they didn't get to, wouldn't have seen otherwise. I think then it's very important and it's very constructive. I just think it's important that any kind of conflict, and again, as Dawn said, shouldn't be avoided. It should be, though, necessary if it's going to come up. And I think it's up to leadership to really sort of put the guidelines down there to know what's acceptable and what isn't when there's conflict. So again, to make sure it's not something personal, but that it's approached in a way where everybody has the right heart and everybody has the proper intent.
I can add to that. I think I would say productive conflict creates innovation. If it is useless conflict, creates confusion and waste of time. So, of course, this needs to be thought through by the leadership. As just said, leadership has to participate. Conflict is actually productive if it is really used in the best way, because conflict meaning they're really participating in it. I mean, the useful conflict, because they will say, okay, look, you need to do this. And I think we should consider that and explore that. But sometimes, as Dawn said, if it is for complaining and it's not the compensation is not that good or whatever, the complaining is it's a waste of time. The encouraging real productive conflict is a part of the management scheme. It should be there because it creates a lot of new things. Neat things can, that's how the companies grow.
I love that frame of conflict. Productive conflict leads to innovation. I'm like going to put that on a wall somewhere. I think that's a real touchstone.
That's a tweet. That's like a tweet times infinity. I was just going to say, I think Ray Dalio really made some great points in his book Principles when he talked about productive conflict, and that in the case of the Bridgewater Fund, it was a must. I mean, it was expected that someone would call out, but always in a polite way and never in a personal way, but they would call out anybody. They were expected to call out anybody or anything, including Mr. Dalio himself, when there was something that did not benefit the team. If someone did something, said something, suggested something that was not, it was expected that there would be conflict. But again, in the frame that we're utilizing it was always something that was going to advance the company forward and be of help to the clients.
And I think that's a really good point there, Bob, is that if you're going to have productive conflict, it's really good to have a framework around which you engage in conflict before you're in it. Because otherwise, everybody has their own communication fingerprint about how they are engaging in conflict, and you end up with a mess.
I think that's a really good point. And I liked your point earlier, Bob, about leadership needing to model, what the expectations are and what the standards are for conflict. And I think that's so important. People will look to the leader about and try to judge how they're supposed to act. And so as a leader, you need to be really aware of that. And so if conflict comes up, how you deal with that in the moment will tell your entire team how conflict is supposed to be handled in that team. So if conflict comes up and you shut it down, then people understand, hey, conflict's not okay here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can add to that in the sense, at least from my experience. When we get together, the leadership get together with participants from even in the middle level or even lower level people together, I always use as an experiment, start something which may not be totally acceptable to everybody. So start that as initially bringing it out to encourage conflict in a productive way, so that they can start providing ideas or suggestions, or it could be even very creative way of solving the problem. So you initiate, the leadership should initiate in a productive conflict manner, but not useless conflict. So there is a distinction, but that needs to be understood by the top management.
And I'm wondering, so if you are the leader, how do you notice? Because I've seen a lot of situations being an external consultant where a team is in conflict and the leader doesn't realize it, that they're in unproductive conflict. How do you notice as a leader that your team is in unproductive conflict?
I do think that some of the signals that your team may be in kind of a chronic, non-productive conflict would be if things aren't getting done, right? If you're really not progressing on your objectives, if people are coming to your office complaining about other colleagues a lot, or, there is a sense, that there is that kind of churn or, unrest, if you will. And it takes, some good emotional intelligence, I think, in what Mohan, you're getting to, like a good leader has good emotional intelligence and can sort of sense these things. It also helps, I found, to really, be listening to all, not just members of a leadership team, but other people who interface with those leaders. Like I had an admin in my last role was a functional leader for about 100-person department. And oh my gosh, did she have her finger on the pulse of everything? Like she could tell you how the sentiment, if you will, the mood of the building. And it was just a great resource for me to just understand, were we on track? Did something need to be surfaced and dealt with, or were we in a good place?
And Don mentioned emotional intelligence, which of course is always so very important. And go back to a moment for a minute to just the concept of emotions, and the way conflict is handled has a lot to do with whether it's productive or unproductive or counterproductive. And even if it's a good reason to have the productive conflict, if it's handled emotionally and unproductively, now you've still got a lousy situation. So I think in a sense there's a bit of training, and I think Mohan references as well in preparation that train how to have conflict, how to have productive conflict, and teaching that the first thing is we've got to master our emotions, because it's very human when we see, so especially if we care about the organization and we care about the people, and and it's very easy to get emotional and say, hey, this is this or that, right? When we can come across in a way that's really not how we want to come across. So I think really understanding those emotions and how to present a conflict, I think is very important as well.
Yeah, I can add to that to some extent. If it is a productive conflict, can actually change the course of the company. If you have the right type of conflict in the team, you will recognize there is some issues going to be there. So you can make the course correction at the right time, rather than use the conflict into going into waste. So that's something very useful. So it all depends on the leadership still. The leadership has to initiate that process and invite suggestions, creating conflict in a productive way, which will save the company sometimes. It's a very valuable thing.
So I've often said that if you don't have conflict, if there's more than two people involved, somebody's lying. That's the reality. You have to be able to engage in conflict. And I think what we're saying for leaders, if we're going to give a tip at this point, is teach your team how to engage in productive conflict, because otherwise they're going to get into this circle of unproductive conflict, and it's not going to be good for anyone. So that is our 10 minutes. I'm going to have to cut us off there. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I have enjoyed it immensely, and I look forward to doing it again with each of you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.